Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today. It's good to see you. For the remainder of this evening, getting a bit tired now, we're going to just look in depth, and I might carry it on tomorrow. And we're going to look in depth. We've looked at this book before, but I want us to look in depth concerning what Professor John Lennox has said in his book Gunning for God. I think that book is an excellent book. I don't agree with everything, but I think it's a very challenging book, and I think it's a very scholarly book and well worthy of consideration. In the book he has a quote: even if they can't be herded, cats in sufficient numbers can make a lot of noise, and they cannot be ignored. Richard Dawkins. There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. British Humanist Buzz Advertising Campaign. Lennox writes, atheism is on the march in the Western world. Noisily and concerted attempt is still being made to marshal the atheist faithful, to encourage them not to be ashamed of their atheism, but to stand up and fight as a united army. The enemy is God. They are gunning for God, and the biggest gun, otherwise known as the former Oxford Professor of the Public Understanding of Science, has been Richard Dawkins. In 2005, he was voted the magazine's Prospect UK as one of 3 leading public intellectuals in the world. His book The God Delusion, published in 2006, has dominated bestseller lists and sold over 2 million copies in English alone. I've never really enjoyed Dawkins. I've never thought much of his scholarship personally. However, there is now an even bigger gun, certainly so far as scientific credentials are concerned, the Cambridge theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking. For years, Hawking appeared to have left the question of God open. At the end of his best-selling A Brief History of Time, he wrote, if we discover a complete theory, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God. However, in his latest book, The Grand Design, co-authored with Leonard Mlodinow, he claims there is now no room for God. Richard Dawkins is delighted, of course, and speaking of God, he says, Darwin kicked him out of biology, but physics remains more uncertain. Hawking is now administering the coup de grace. Trailing behind Dawkins come a flank of lesser calibre but equally trigger-happy fusiliers. First, the highly articulate British-born US-based Christopher Hitchens, who's passed away, a writer and professor of liberal studies in New York, who wrote God Is Not Great. Next is a scientist, Daniel Dennett, who produced Breaking the Spell, Religion as a Natural Phenomenon. He describes himself as a godless philosopher. Finally, the more junior Sam Harris, a graduate of neuroscience, who has written The End of Faith, Letter to a Christian Nation, and more recently The Moral Landscape. The anti-God adrenaline is now only running in the English-speaking world. In France, the most prominent activist is unsurprisingly not a scientist but a philosopher. He is the prolific author Michel Onfray, who has written in defense of atheism. Dressed from head to foot in black, he regularly addresses overflowing crowds of eager listeners. In Italy, the mathematician Pier Giorgio Odifredi has stirred up controversy with his essay Why We Cannot Be Christians, Much Less Catholics. The Vatican is not amused by his parody of the Latin blessing, in which he replaces the Trinity by Pythagoras, Archimedes and Newton. Dawkins hopes that he can orchestrate an atheist revival, although the task he feels is tricky as the proverbial herding of cats. Even if they can't be herded, cats in sufficient numbers can make a lot of noise, and they cannot be ignored. Well, he is cat herder-in-chief, and his colleagues are certainly showing how to make plenty of noise. Whether that noise can be resolved into intelligible language is another matter entirely. So we're going to continue a long series on Lennox and his book. I gave my copy away, so I'm using it from Google Books, so I'll try and remember some of the things that I read as well. What concerns me there is Dawkins talking about the herding of cats. You know, you have to really understand that every position there is always control involved, and there is no difference here concerning the new atheist. they are a very, very controlling group, and I find that very concerning, because as a person who believes in democracy, I really do feel that this is a very aggressive kind of movement. I've said it many, many times before, and I'll never ever get tired of saying it. And I am always been and will continue to be worried about this militant atheism. And what is refreshing is that a professor of Oxford sees the same. I think that these people like Dawkins, etc., do not show to me the best essence of Christian or atheist scholarship. They don't really engage with the best thinking concerning their opponents. I think the key thing that I think is important, that Lennox is really hinting at, is there is this aggressiveness from these modern atheists, and I think a lot of people now are getting tired of it. They're getting fed up of it, and they're beginning to see what it is. And I think the tide has changed, where this aggressive atheism is now abating, and we're entering more of a gentlemanly kind of culture again concerning atheism and Christianity. But this aggressive atheism is something that I think Lennox has seen. You might disagree, but I've seen it and I find it extremely disturbing. Thank you.